What is consciousness? And what does it mean to truly live life awake? Welcome to Clarity to Consciousness, a podcast where we transcend beyond stereotypes, embracing a deeper understanding. I'm your host, Kristen Griffiths, a fellow seeker on this path. Join me on a journey as we dive into conversations with experts, unraveling stigmas, and expanding our awareness to something profound. This is your invitation to open your mind with me as together we bring clarity to the fascinating complexities of human consciousness. Welcome to Clarity to Consciousness, where we seek to bring clarity to the complexities of human consciousness. I'm your host, Kristen Lee Griffiths, and I am so very grateful to have you back for part 3 of our Conscious Divorce series. I'm really excited for today's episode because we'll be discussing the side of divorce you typically don't see, which is the spiritual side. That is, what is beyond our 3D reality. If you're experiencing divorce and you're anything like me, I did not go into my wedding day expecting to be divorced. In fact, everything about marrying my partner that day felt right to me. Now, for some, perhaps they knew it didn't feel right from the beginning. But for me, I felt like I was marrying my soulmate. I look back and I'm always left wondering, like, what went wrong? How did this happen? How did I get here? And I'm really excited to talk about that today with my returning guest, who's here to help us to understand some of these aspects from a higher spiritual perspective. She's one of my favorite people to chat with because she's always bringing incredible wisdom. And she's also someone who I've had a very interesting conversation with about my own divorce experiences, several of them, in fact. I'm excited to bring back to the podcast my friend, spiritual teacher, and pioneer in the spiritual healing community, Colleen St. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be back. And what a relevant topic. It's so good. And, just in your intro, I have like 1,000 things to add. Like the thing you asked, it's like, you asked yourself what went wrong. And, spiritually, it's like what went right because you grew, right? And so in that aspect of asking yourself what went wrong, it's a lot of pressure for one person to feel that they're responsible for 100% of a relationship. And when two people are evolving, right? So where we were the day we met our original partners, right? Think about your life. Where were you at? What were your wants? What were you manifesting in that aspect? So, what was your stream of consciousness? Sometimes people are like, I just want a nice person. I just want a nice person. I just want a nice person because the last person was like a cheat. They ran on them. They didn't respect them. They didn't have respect for time or appreciate them. So their entire energy is really kind of focusing on that one aspect. So yes, they meet that person and there's an alignment, but as they start to grow through life, the person may not have all the other aspects that are truly important that you may not have given much energy to. And so we meet people at our consciousness and where we're at, right? So it's like to think back of how things evolved. It's like, okay, well, who was I at that point? Obviously it satisfied who you were at that point. But that's why it's so important to get to know your whole being so you can understand what is it that you're contributing to this kind of collective relationship that you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've recognized now that my needs today were much different or are much different than they were back 10, 11 years ago when I first met my husband. And so I totally agree with that. And I'm wondering, just thinking about, why two people come together. If you are feeling like marrying somebody is right, and then you end up being divorced years later, do you find people questioning their own intuition or the way they felt back then? And what do you tell people?
Yeah. In connecting with the angels, because when I went through my own divorce, it was like traumatizing because I was Catholic, there was infidelity, there was so much, but there's no blame because there was so much that was sitting on top of that like big end game that I didn't want to know or see, or I knew it. I just kept trying to negotiate myself to fit in something that I was not in alignment with. And, I, met my first partner when I was 18 years old. He was my senior by 8 years. So, relatively, I was not even familiar who I was as an adult, much less who I was as a partner. And, so I learned quickly to adapt to someone else's behaviors that didn't come out till later, right? Like the person I met and the person I married, two very different people. And so, when you go through that process of thinking, okay, well, why the heck did this come together? Like, what is this about? And, when I spoke with my teams and the angels, asking them consistently, like, am I committing a sin because I made a Catholic contract? Now, I'm in Catholic recovery since then. I still love my background and my faith, but that was a noose of really holding me in an unhealthy, toxic environment for me. And it was what kept me there for almost 20 years because I was Catholic. So I kept negotiating and negotiating. So the purpose is a karmic one, right? So we make karmic agreements prior to coming in the world. And when we're going through a karmic growth cycle, we then can exercise free will. Like my karma ended very early on in the relationship with my ex-partner. However, I extended the warranty for years and years and years. That was the free will choice because I learned, in a sense, experienced the karmic connection that brought us together, meaning I needed to grow through something in this lifetime. And my soul agreed upon it with this person because majority of how karmic works, relationships work, is that we've experienced it in another lifetime where maybe we were the ones who were not either treating people well or we needed to grow through that experience. So the free will kicks in, and that's when we tend to extend our warranty of the karmic relationships where, the debt's done, but we keep showing up to pay it. Right?
Your analogies are so good. Yeah.
My debt was done way, 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 way long ago. And I'm like, I answered that call. Do you want to extend your warranty? I was like, yes, I do. But the umbrella of Catholicism was completely, over me that you make your bed, you lie in it.
Yeah.
Somehow I started to believe that I was responsible for them or responsible. And it was really, foolish now that I know this. But at the time, it was like, okay, how do I keep adapting? Or let me just try this. Or hopefully someone will change. And, that it doesn't work when that's not karmic. Waiting around for someone to change is not karmic. That's a free will choice.
Yeah. So how did you know, or maybe you didn't know, but then you learned later that the karmic ties were, or the karmic debt had been paid, so to speak? Is that, because I think that could probably work with any relationship, not just marriage. Is there,
Right.
is there something that tipped you off? Just so
Good
people
question.
to recognize. Yeah.
That's a really good question because through clients will, as I teach people, to really trust into their intuition. And then they'll come back and be like, I swore my intuition told me that I was supposed to go on a date with this person. And then they turned out to be a jerk.
Yeah.
Right. So why was my intuition wrong? Your intuition wasn't wrong. That was someone coming into your world to check off a karmic box, to open the energy up, to then lead you to that next level of relationship alignment. Right. So a lot of times we'll have a revisiting theme or a loop where nothing is changing and it keeps repeating. It's like behavior. It's like, oh, I promise I'll be better. I promise I'll try. And then it's flatlined. Right. And then there's this cycle of it's almost like people who are like addicted to the drama, then the makeup, and then they're addicted to that dopamine rush of like the fix of like, we're fighting and then we get back and then we're fighting and hoping things will change. Well, that's usually a sign that the karma is, complete, because you're consistently just kind of enabling each other to stay in this toxic cycle, more so than allowing yourself to say, okay, I don't like the energy of this now. I don't have to leave the relationship, but I'm going to pull back and not keep participating in this aspect of the relationship. And then you really get to see where someone is energetically, if they want to change or they don't want to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's a really hard thing. It's like, we can trust our intuition. Karma has, it's karma in Sanskrit means come back, right? That's the definition of karma, is come back.
Oh, okay.
So when we are experiencing a karmic connectivity to someone else, it's coming back to us, right? And sometimes if the behavior doesn't feel nice or it's someone's acting a certain way, we may have been that in another lifetime. So it's not a punishment. It's a soul's opportunity to evolve and grow into a higher level of vibrational living and alignment.
Yeah,
I mean, when you're going through it, I'm not, I'm going through it. So
yeah.
I can say it with neutrality now. But when you're going through it, you feel like you're in an emotional tsunami, right? Because it's like every part of you knows that you are undeserving of this. Every part of you knows. But then it's like, oh my gosh, right? We have so many trapped emotions that are surrounding us. So a lot of times when relationships end, the quick question you need to ask yourself is like, how loud is your ego right now? Are you upset that it ends because of how it looks to the community? Are you upset that it ends because you had a different plan? Are you upset that it ended because you're afraid to be alone? Right? So a lot of times the reason why this relationships become so unhealthy is because one person is negotiating or holding on to something that they're not in alignment with. Who wants to be, I didn't want to be alone. That was a fear of mine. It was like staying in the discomfort of unhealthy became a familiar discomfort. So that idea of being alone, it's like, but now I'm like, I love being in my own company. And, I sat in that discomfort rather than sat in the fear indefinitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think being alone is probably the biggest thing that prevents a lot of people from divorce, or just maybe they just feel like they can't do it financially, or maybe it's fear itself. But
Well, there's a lot of storytellers, right? So there's a lot of different within us. We're the storytellers. Right? So it's not like we're coming to library time and someone's reading us a horror story of romance. We are the creators of those horror stories, right? So we're the ones that tell ourselves that being alone equals this. We're the one that tells ourselves I'm too old to meet someone. We're the one that tells ourselves that it's horrible dating out there. Well, all you're doing is planting seeds to bring those fears into your orbit. But truthfully, spiritually, the angels view everything as alignment. And they said that we would take things less personally if we started viewing connectivities in either romantic relationships or personal relationships, that if we're not in alignment with someone, right? That is the key of it. Like, you may want this and someone else may be content being here, right? It's a disrespect to keep telling this person that they need to change for you, right? You're now telling them that they're not enough and they need to be more to satisfy you, right? I mean, such a human exchange, right? They need to change because I feel this way, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like an afterthought that you would think that. The angels are like, how disrespectful to criticize someone else's soul space, right? Well, the life that they have in contentment is maybe someone wants to go out and the other person's a homebody. right?
Mm.
And often you'll see that one person hasn't really changed. It's the person who wants them to change is uncomfortable, because then they're the one that has to make a decision
Mm.
based on their own higher good, right? Rather
Yep.
than just seeing it and saying, wow, I really love this person. They're a good person and I'm a good person, but we're just not good together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is if we can start viewing things in that aspect of, instead of going on, smear campaigns and trashing people and talking trash on them to deflect and defend your wounds, it's truly about just looking at them and being like, wow, they're a really good person. If they are a good person, because often good people just aren't good together.
Yeah.
And of course it hurts. And of course, this divorce is nothing that no one steps up to the altar and being like, they have a lawyer on retainer just in case in a couple of years it's not working, right? It's like,
Right.
that's not what it's about. It's about understanding the alignment of energy. What was I attracting, and what did someone treat me like during the duration of our relationship, right? Well, my core wound years ago was, I'm the girl who gets left, or I'm not enough, right? So I was treated identical to the energy that I was living, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I believed it first. Like, they only proved to me what
Yep.
I thought.
Yep. They
So
reflected it back to you. Yeah.
when
Mm-hmm.
there is an ending in a relationship, the angels always say, like, people are so quick to just, you know, replay the same movie. They're buying a ticket to the next movie with just different characters, right? Because they just got out of this movie and that fear of being alone kicks in. So they just run out there, right? And usually they're going to attract something much more intense than what they got out of, because they haven't worked on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's very possible people can be in relationships and work on themselves before the relationship ends, right? So it's many different variables. It's very personal per person, but it's never a wrong connection. It's how long we take to recognize either we're growing together or we're growing apart.
Oh, so helpful. I I think it took me a lot of years to kind of come up with that myself, or be okay with the fact that we were growing apart. That in my own experience, that's
Well, no
that's
one
how I
wants to
feel. Yeah.
ever hurt anyone,
Right.
right? So it's not the intention, right? So if we're talking about healthy people who are just not in alignment with one another, it's no one wants to have that conversation that tells someone else something that could hurt them, right? Especially if someone else is complacent and where it is, right? So trying to tap dance what you need to someone else is pointless, right? Because how do you sell what your needs are? And I'm sure prior to having that difficult conversation, there's been other conversations that may have been missed, right? So
Yep.
when you actually make that decision to transition and say, you know what, we're not in alignment anymore, and these are the wants I have. And if you believe and take it inside to yourself that to not take it personally, right? Like, you can't take it personally that, like, I'm ruining their life. I am solely responsible. They are responsible for their happiness, their life, and their well-being. Yes, it sucks. I mean,
Mhm.
it's no one wants to raise their hand and be like, let's do this. Let's get
Mhm.
divorced.
Yeah.
However, you're opening up love in such a soul aligned way when you leave something that's not in alignment. You're
Mm.
giving mass love to yourself to say, I am worthy and deserving of having an aligned love. And you are freeing that person to find a love that is in a vibrational alignment to their wants and needs, right? So it's like, it may hurt at the moment, but really you're freeing each other to live out your next, stage of life.
Yeah. Do you think that people ever come together for the sole reason to have a child?
Mm, yeah, because it's part of that is definitely a soul agreement that's made on the other side because children choose their parents, right? So often people will be like, well, why on earth would my child choose to have a parent who's not in their life, right? Well, maybe they were a parent in another life and were not in their child's life, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe, on the soul side, when everybody's at the soul table making agreements, of course, everything's capable, you're capable of doing anything, and you have that complete knowledge of what you're capable of, right? But then as soon as you hit Earth School, it's like humanity kicks in, polarization and density kicks in, and often people forget while they're here. That's why you see a lot of old soul children and young soul parents or parent, right? And because it's like, okay, people, I'm the teacher, the child. When I come into this world, you both have an opportunity to grow and evolve and step up. Unfortunately, you see a lot of parents still in the playground not wanting to come in, and they're holding a clipboard saying, like, we have a schedule, people. It's like they're trying to get the attention. And then you have children who grow up too quickly, right? Because they become the parents of their parents, even from a young age. But it's all in a soul alignment. Our children have soul paths just like we do, right? And as parents, we always try to jump in front of them and create, protection. But sometimes that protection is really our wounds that or we're trying to protect, not necessarily theirs. And it's the angels always said it's healthier to show your children healthy love than preach to them what love should be while you're standing in something that is out of alignment with your
Yes.
soul.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure that happens a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like
Uh-huh.
you hear often people are like, I'm just going to wait till they get out of college. And, there's no right time.
Mhm.
Usually people are postponing for many different reasons and there's no judgment. However, putting your children in as a shield doesn't always work. It should never work because they didn't have a say in who either parent was in this world. They did on the other side, but here it's a different story.
Yeah.
And kids adjust to the healthiness of us. When we heal ourselves, when we show a healthy way of approaching, and kids learn more from how we stood up for ourselves rather than just sacrificing. Like I loved my parents. I didn't love them together,
Yeah.
and a
Mhm.
lot of times in that separation space or that divorce space, another parent who maybe wasn't as hands-on has an opportunity to evolve and become more hands-on and develop a different relationship with their children than they had previously.
Yeah.
It's a great karmic ball.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you and I had a lot of those conversations. And I think for me, one of the most powerful ones you had shared with me based off of the readings that we've had together is
Mhm.
that for me, the karma was in a past life, the inverse happened in the relationship with me and my spouse, meaning that um, he was the one to initiate the divorce in that scenario.
Mhm.
And so that is the karma that we were playing out in this lifetime, which I thought was
Well,
a really interesting way to
right.
look.
And left can mean in many different things, but it's also true to understand that just because we have karma with someone doesn't make it an ending of something either. Right. So
Mm.
we then have an opportunity to grow together and then evolve into something else if we choose. Right. So it's like a video game. It's like we start off playing the game. We may stop at level 1 because that's where the karma ends, or we can choose to keep playing and do the different levels and grow together. So each person has their own free will as to what lessons they have to grow through and what lessons they're here to experience. Everything is on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? Our breath,
Yeah.
we're here on purpose. And just being here is purposeful to our soul that is desiring growth.
Yeah. Well, you and I had talked about how divorce can be an emotional tsunami.
Yeah.
And I love the term. I love the visual. Um,
Quad polar
and
at times.
and I do agree based off of the experiences that I've had. But I think there's probably ways to help people through this from a spiritual perspective that we haven't talked about before. And so I wanted to spend some time talking about what are some spiritual practices that people can do or practice to support themselves going through the emotional tsunami and those karmic ties that they're dealing with their ex.
So, first thing is to whatever seat you may be sitting in, right? Because sometimes when divorce happens, it's because maybe one person behaved a certain way that was a betrayal to the family, or maybe they're on the other end of someone not being nice to someone, or maybe that they're in a cycle of unhealthy, toxic family, history of learning, wounded love. So, first thing that needs to happen is to forgive yourself, right? The Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian forgiveness prayer, which is like my jam. It's my go-to.
Mm-hmm.
And meet yourself where you're at, right? Because often people are more upset with the fear of the unknown. So they start to, immerse themselves in the fear of the future and creating this stories and scenarios, or what if they love someone else more than me, what if they're, they start separating and detaching from themselves rather than really truly investing in that relationship with themselves, right? Because every experience offers us an opportunity to be. My mantra was when I started my healing journey to, you know dating myself after the divorce was, I can be bitter or I can be better, right?
Mm.
And so it's a clear choice. Like, I needed to make a clear choice because my long game goal was that I was going to have a healthy, heartfelt, loving relationship. That was my end game, right? So I needed to see, how do I get from here to here? And if I wanted to stay the victim and stay in the blame and stay in the pointing the fingers and to do that, I could do that for a lifetime. I had
Yeah.
enough material, I could have. So,
Oh, no.
however, I needed to take ownership, right? So we start to go into our shadow work, and it will depend on what phase you're in, right? Because there is that like shock and awe. If you're not prepared for it, then there's like the grief phases, right? You need to honor the grief, and it's a living grief, right? So it's a little different than if someone passes, because it's a little kind of personal because you feel like maybe a person didn't choose you or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Honor the grief, meet the grief, right? When you're in this space, it's now time to ask yourself, what do I have control over, right? Because you don't have control over what someone else feels. You don't have control over what someone else is doing. You don't have control over X, Y, and Z. So really making a list, what do I have control over? Because at most points of divorce, it feels like everything is out of control,
Yeah.
right? The rug's pulled out of your life. Everything is going to look different. So how do we approach that? So what I did was I acknowledged my role in the relationship. And that was not easy, right? It was not easy at all. Again, this is also sensitive to, if you're like 3 days into it, this is not going to be your starting point. You just need to breathe, right?
Okay. Yes.
Because if you're, now ready to start the healing journey, and it's taking ownership of what role you played in the relationship and acknowledging that role. It's not judging it, but it's acknowledging. My question to myself was, what in me accepted someone's abusive behavior, right? And your ego is going to kick into overdrive. And it's just going to kick you into a world of stories of saying, like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And it's going to take you down all these rabbit holes. Well, I said this and they said this and da, da, da. Well, the ownership was, I was a victim the first time someone spoke poorly to me. And then I was a volunteer every year after. Every experience after I was a volunteer, it was a choice. When I negotiated with myself and changed who I was to keep meeting someone else at their wounds, that was a choice. I was the one who chose not to speak up. I was the one. So taking accountability and ownership will give you the tools of growth to break the cycle of what you do not want to experience again. Right? So again, it's not like I sat down and was like, whoa, like, Colleen, it was very painful. Right? So when different events would come up in my thoughts, the first thing I would do is the Ho'oponopono.
And can you talk about what that is?
Sure. It's the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a pure prayer because, and I learned this prayer on the journey because as I started the road to forgiveness, I realized I sucked at it. I was not good at forgiveness. I said to the angels, I'm like, I don't know what path everybody else is falling to peace, but I am pissed. And this doesn't feel good. And they said, because you're viewing it with attachment rather than viewing it as you're not talking to a person and saying, I forgive you for these behaviors, or calling the human who is going through growth cycles, I forgive you. You're talking to the soul, right? So it's a soul to soul communication and saying, I am sorry. Like, I'm sorry, Colleen. How I would do it was like, I'm sorry, Colleen, that I allowed you to be in these situations that were really punishing to your spirit. Like, I am so sorry that I didn't stand up for myself. I'm so, like, I would just kind of bleed out, like, and give the compassion that I so desperately wanted from the person I was with.
Yes. And you gave it to yourself.
That deep-hearted apology. So it's, I'm sorry, I forgive me, I love me, and I thank me, right? And I realized there's so much power in being a volunteer, right? Being a victim of something creates that, entanglement of your energy and your control of what you have power over. When you're a volunteer, it's like, wow, okay, that was a choice I made in that decision, but now I know better, I can do better. But it really comes down to that self-forgiveness to myself, because how many times I'm like, how am I so stupid? Why did I stay? Why didn't I should have known? Well, you know what? Hindsight is powerful because it is the growth that we've experienced having lived it. Right. So we know that X, Y, and Z is the outcome because we lived it. Other than that, we would just be, dreaming about all the different scenarios that could have happened. Right. So there's a lot of really rich wealth in knowing what you know. Now, it doesn't work out well, right? You just maybe stuck your finger in the socket too many times. That third electrocution you learned.
Right. I'm going to do this again.
Exactly. Right. And a lot of times when we're stuck in those loops of self-depreciating behavior, the loop lessons get louder and louder. And usually someone doesn't actually pay attention that things are really wonky until it gets loud. Right. Like we've ignored or avoided all those little signals leading up to it or avoided it.
Right.
So when we're in this healing portion of it, it's becoming curious. It's becoming an investigator, right? If you know what you don't want, that is a really strong guide for you. Because if you asked me at that point, Colleen, what do you want? I was like, I didn't have a clue, right? Because I knew what everybody else needed. I knew I wasn't a person living life for my own enjoyment. I was living it to survive. So no one asked me what I want. So why should I dream in that direction when it wasn't a reality? Right. So knowing what you don't want lead you into a direction of then being able to draw an arrow and say, okay, the opposite of that is, presenting it. So when we get to this place where we acknowledge what we had, our part, we then become aware of where it has affected us in our lives. That's the next part. Where is this wound showing up? Right. And then it's about neutralizing it. Releasing it is something that doesn't really, yeah, we can release it, but where are we putting it? So it's like I would love a box that I could just tuck it and Goodwill it, but neutralizing helps you to then become aware of where you're triggered. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you neutralize something, you don't get triggered by it. Right. So you're not taking the lesson and diluting it to act like it wasn't important. You're just taking it and neutralizing it and saying, this doesn't work for me.
Okay. That's really helpful.
Writing, lots of writing too.
Writing
Mind
too.
dumping, writing nasty letters that you don't send, getting it out on paper, like just writing.
What about this term called cord cutting? You and I have talked about it. It's a helpful tool, I believe. Can you talk about what cords are and why it's important to do cord cutting, especially in those types of situations?
We're energetic beings, we're etheric beings, right? So we have a physical body, we have an energy body, and everything is energy. So when we connect, we're connecting a cord, right? So when you meet people and it's just a brief encounter, there is a small cord. So it's like a dental floss. So when you release or leave that, experience, then the cord is dissolved. However, when we become intimate with people or we become into relationships with people, different aspects apply to, like if there's codependency in the relationship or if there's, it's all different factors of what that looks like. But cords are like energy. They can steal your energy, the energy thieves, right? And when people become intimate, like that is the most intimate exchange of energy that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So cords are then developed, whereas say if someone feels like they need you to be happy, well, they have a cord then attached into your like back, your heart center. If someone feels like they need you to feel safe, then they'll have it like in your root chakra.
Mm.
When people have cords attached, often it creates a lot of static in relationships and it hinders growth. People think like, oh, well, you want a cord to the people you love. You don't. Because that discounts what you feel, think, and believe. Because that person's energy is moving through you and influencing how then you choose to respond to situations. Right? So if you have someone who's being very reactive and there's a cord attached, well, then you're going to become instantly reactive.
Oh, yeah. So we can somewhat control those cords, right? Or we can release them, right?
Correct. So like each day, cord cutting to me as an empath is one of the most powerful tools I have in my toolbox because as an empath, I already am very sensitive to people's energies. Well, then amplify that with cords attached to it. I am now making my decisions based off of what everybody needs because it validates what I already feel. Right. So that was one of the parts where I had to learn that I didn't know who I was because I had all these cords running through me like an operator, like an old time phone operator. Right. And I was just connecting people with what they needed. Right. Because I could feel it. And so when we dissolve our cords, the intention is we can release these cords with love, right? We're sending love through the cords because our energy is our own and the other person's energy is theirs. And on any day, we don't have control on how they respond to life. So having a cord is like, okay, great, I feel this, but I have no control over X, Y, and Z. So when you find couples that are constantly bickering over the same thing over and over and over again, they're never going to grow unless those cords are dissolved because they're trapped in that energy, right? And when the cords are dissolved, it allows people to see things from a different perspective. So it's a simple act of just saying, Archangel Michael, please dissolve all cords of attachment with love. And in doing so, it is just sending love to the other person, even if you're angry at them, even if it's somebody because a lot of toxic relationships have very, very toxic cords, right? It's like when you have someone who has a lower vibrational behavior pattern and they're living there, they have a cord attached to you, it's like you're being suffocated, energetically.
Yeah.
So send love to the soul, not the skin suit, right? Because the skin suit is the one doing the human experience. The soul is like, we didn't sign up for all this. Like they went on their own. Like, this is rogue. Like, we're not here to live in this density. So in dissolving those cords with love, you're freeing yourself. Remember, karma is come back. So we're sending out the next commands of karma that are coming to us. So how we respond to things is so important, because if we want to complete the lesson so we don't have to keep repeating it down the road. Right? And compassion and love and forgiveness doesn't mean that you accept someone's shitty behavior. It just means that you're going to send love to their soul and free yourself from carrying around that resentment, that anger, that agitation, that frustration, that, all those stories in your head. So,
no, I was going to ask you, being that you are an angel intuitive and you connect with angels and guides a lot for people, how do those angels and guides support people when they're going through really hard times, like divorce or other hard times as well? Is there any signs or signals that we can look for to know that we're not alone during those hard times?
Absolutely. So across the board, angels don't judge anyone as good, bad, right, or wrong. Right? So they see only love. So we may be thinking, okay, this person did X, Y, and Z, and it's very hurtful to me. Well, the angels don't have your back to, like, they're not your ride or die that are going to kick their ass.
Yeah.
So they love us all, like, unconditionally. And I mean, I've had people ask me over the years, they're like, are my angels furious at them? And I'm like, well, our angels are kind of universal love. So they look at the person as it's a reflection of how wounded they are, not so much their true character. Right. So to support us, we always have to ask for assistance, right? Often we want God to do it for us. And so what we have to understand is that our soul is a spark of God's light. So God's in us. So when we're in this healing, when we feel that feeling of fear, insecurity, sadness, that depth of just soul ripping grief, now is the time that we lean in onto that light and we say, like, the angels are supporting that light, that spark of God that's within us, right? They're messengers of God, right? So they're messengers of the light, and they are giving us messages into our light through intuitive impressions. And it can be as simple as seeing numbers on a clock. It could be like, I remember I had a bit of a spiritual tantrum when I was going through all my stuff. Like, I was mad. And I remember just saying, like, Archangel Michael, like, God, like, I'm such a good person. Like, why is all of this happening? Like, honestly, the only thing I do, like, I literally serve people. Like, and they said, part of this experience is because you never served yourself. That you allowed it to just steamroll you. And I was like, womp womp. So, I mean, and they couldn't do it for me. And this is a powerful thing that I asked. And I think I shared this to you. I remember when I really was, like, done, and I had had enough of finding out, like, that it was like every time I turned around, it was something else that was hurting me. Right. And I remember saying to the angels, like, you tell me when to leave and I am out the door. Like, just tell me when to leave. Tell me when to do it. Right. And it would be like flatline, nothing. I'd be like, is this thing on? Like, are you guys listening? And I was so frustrated. because I would be in sessions and I would get plans laid out by the angels for people to how to navigate their worlds, not relationships, their worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, have I done something to offend you that I can't get a whisper of guidance when it comes to answering this question? And Archangel Michael said, happy people don't ask if they should leave.
Huh.
And I was like, wing slap. It was true. I was trying to put it on to the angels that I would be just obedient once again and never make a decision for myself, right? Everything in me was saying evacuate, but I was still waiting for permission,
right,
to make a decision that was best for me, right? And that was a very powerful line. Like, people who are happy don't ask if they should leave. I was like, well, no, they don't, I guess. I wouldn't know. But it was powerful because when we ask, that's the key, right? That's the whole key to all of this, is that we need to ask for intervention because we're free will beings. Don't ask for the outcome. Ask for the support, right? Because we're usually wanting an outcome that's like a hop, and the angels want to help us leap, right? So it's like, thank you so much for supporting me. It's like the universe, people think like the universe doesn't have my back, and like it does, but the things that are hard are often the things that are our springboard for the best chapter that we're beginning.
Amen to that.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been such an amazing conversation, as they always are. When I have a chance to talk with you, I always feel so grateful.
Love it.
For this time.
You have the best questions. You do.
But I just wanted to know, so reflecting on our conversation today, what is one key takeaway that you'd like our listeners to remember about consciousness and conscious divorce?
To stop searching for your soul's purpose and step into your soul's genius and its natural energy, because it's the stepping stone to all of the aspects of your life, right? Because most people are getting really stuck on, I got to find my purpose. I got to find my purpose. I got to find my purpose. Well, they're missing the scenery that they're in, right? That is actually part of their purpose, because as souls, we're here purposefully, like we spoke about, but being kind is part of our purpose. Self-love is the one thing that is on every single person's birth chart, is to find the space to have the balance of having compassion for ourselves as well as others, and then having healthy self-love boundaries that don't create judgment, that would create an acceptance, right? It's like, I don't have to like everyone. I can love your soul. I don't have to like your personality, but I also don't have to give you space in my head either. I can just witness it, sending you love, and that's okay. Right? And especially as we're coming into this time, we're going to see some more polarity, of the different energies that are moving around, and the hate campaigns and the slurs and the this. It is more important than ever to stay in that space of self-love, that you don't need to battle anyone on what you believe, right? You don't need to prove or tap dance to anyone as to who you are. And you can still listen and not feel attacked by other people's beliefs. But you also have the right to set a healthy boundary and say, well, I believe you believe that. And don't give that airspace that you have trying to sell someone who's not in the same vibration your higher vibrational perspective, right? So in moving into the higher consciousness space, it's about the awareness of where are we investing ourselves, right? And so if you want a healthy relationship, well, now you know where to invest yourself, right? So that you can create a complement of a partnership that you want to experience. If it's financial gain, that's where you're going to invest your energy, on your abundance, right? It's about creating a receptivity energy that allows you to receive it and accept it. And what's standing in the way of that? It might be worthiness. It might be deservingness. It might be old patterns. It's our responsibility now to go in and heal that space. Right. So it's about taking responsibility of what's standing between you and your soul's genius of living it out loud.
Hmm. And if someone's just starting their journey towards a deeper understanding of consciousness, what advice would you offer them?
Don't overload yourself. I find that people get so hungry that they actually confuse themselves into panic. So if it is a new awakening, right, ask yourself intuitively, what should I know? What do I need to know that's going to support me? And those materials, those videos, those people, they'll come into your wheelhouse, but don't feel like you need to run out and, it's like become a crystal expert, become an energy expert, become this, because just like anything else, we're trying to force something that is birthed at its own pace. Right. So it's one thing that can be helpful. And another thing real quick, the angels just want me to bring up, if someone is going through a divorce and is consistently feeling that they cannot move from the pain, right? That it's so, because it makes you sick. Like it does. Yeah. It's just that stomach ache, gut wrenching, like that. I remember that was the hardest part, is like waking up in the morning and just feeling like I couldn't breathe, or waking up and because I only slept an hour, or just feeling so hurt. I remember just asking the angels to please help me through this pain. And I was like, I'll go through it. I just don't want to feel this sickness, this pain in my physical body. And an angel appeared. It was named Archangel Shamuel, and Chamuel. And she is this beautiful pink angel, and she's associated within our heart center. And she said, because me and my sayings, right? I can't just hear something in routine, and I have to have a metaphor or some kind of saying. And she said, here is your spiritual epidural. And it was like the most beautiful thing in the world, because I said, I will go through it. I just don't want to keep feeling this pain. So it allowed me, and I still ask for Shamuel to this day. It's like sometimes if I feel heavy in the heart about a loss or thinking about doing some healing work, I'll say, can I have a spiritual epidural? It allows the pain to express out, but it doesn't hold you hostage.
Wow. What did that feel like?
It was like this calm, just like waved over my body. Like at the time I did it, I was crying. So it was like, when you stop ugly crying and you're like, it's like that feeling. And it was almost like I had this wash of calm that came over, and I felt peaceful. And I had so much gratitude for that moment of peace that I wanted that momentum to keep going. So I really honored that. Like, thank you for this peace. Thank you for this peace. Thank you for the peace.
Yeah.
And then I just kept thanking the peace for being there.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. So and it's like the invitation of accepting, the epidural. And
yes.
If you've ever had one, they're amazing. When you're not a baby.
And I think it's important to say that anybody can do this. You don't have to be somebody who angels
talking
can ask for it.
It's over 20 years ago. I was still in my new phase, right?
Yeah.
And it's like my life exploded during one of the worst parts, exploded in a healthy way during one of the hardest transitions of my life. Right? Like it was straight up alchemy.
Wow. I had an experience too, and thankfully my intuition and being able to hear angels and guides has improved from working with you. And I remember having one of those days, and I was just like, oh God, like, why do I have to feel this? And I wasn't even necessarily asking them per se. Right. I just asked it to ask it.
Right.
And the message I got, like, it was like somebody else said it in my mind. And it was like, you need to feel it so you can heal it.
You need to feel it to heal it. Yep. That's exactly it.
And I was like,
It is
oh,
true because,
mm-hmm,
but feeling it doesn't mean backpacking it, right? There's a
mm-hmm,
big difference. People think they need to wear their pain as a badge of strength, right?
mm-hmm,
Pain is just an indicator that there is something that needs to be healed, right? So the idea of so many people are so fearful, even in grief of loss, right? We're so afraid of the pain. But the truth is, if we sit within ourselves, we realize we've already gone through the pain. So anything that we feel after that is just a reenactment of the scene,
right.
right? Because we've already gone through the initial pain.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we avoiding it? Because we think that that is going to be our consistent energy, our consistent feeling. So it's like when we feel it, it's then allowing ourselves to bring it up, witness it. Where am I doing it? And where do I feel this in my body? Where is my body holding on to this pain? And then really using your breath to express it out.
Mm.
The mistake I see people making, I'm not to say mistake, or the misconception, is feeling that you have to be in the trenches of the rawness to heal anything.
Mm-hmm.
We have so much energy support from the universe right now with so many astral events. We don't need to keep analyzing and making relationships deeper with our wounds. If something is surfacing, it is our job to give it a doorway to express out. We keep shoving it down.
Yep.
Right? Well, there's a pile up
Yep.
and rejection. So guess what? The next person that comes by that feels like it's rejection, you now have your emotional closet bursting open. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that feeling of rejection surfaces up in someone, take a breath, right? Say the word rejection. Feel it. Trigger. Where do you feel it in your body?
Mm-hmm.
Then breathe into it, like holding it. And then as you're releasing it, you are letting the air out of that rejection balloon so it does not blow up confetti in your being. It's a big mess, right?
Mm.
So it's just the allowance of recognizing it and then being aware of how you can express it out healthfully.
Yeah.
No more sitting in the trenches with your pain. Because a lot of times we don't need to know the why something is happening.
Okay.
Investigate it.
Investigate it. All right. This is so good. My last question for you today, in your opinion, what does it mean to live life consciously?
To live life consciously is to live life whole, right? It means to be enlightened, right? And enlightened to me means I'm lightening up the consciousness of the dense feelings and thoughts that I carried for so long, right? So consciousness and enlightenment go hand in hand. And my job is to consistently lighten my mental load from all the old patterns and beliefs that were very dense. So I'm lightening it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so good. This has been one of my favorite conversations.
Yeah.
As always, they are when I get a chance to talk with you. I'm sure many more will want to hear more from you. So, can you share a little bit about where people can find you? I know you have an amazing podcast. Remind us of that.
Yep,
And
I
where
am.
people stay in
I'm
touch.
actually in another, one thing about the energy I will say is that it is forever evolving. Like it's like levels are moving quickly, like energetically. And so when we get out of our own way, it's pretty cool, all the different things that are happening. So in the fall, I'm going to be launching Awakening of Your Soul's Genius. And it'll be a 6-week program. I'm going to do it online. And it's just about falling into alignment with your essence, falling into alignment with an extraordinary life rather than chasing your purpose. And all the different pieces that create a separation will be addressed, right? What's creating a separation from us living our soul genius? And in that aspect, I'm so excited about it because I'm like, this is so powerful for me because 2 years ago I developed the course. And 2 years I have been unconsciously living the course, right? And I hit a point when I was creating it, I was like, felt like the inspiration wall punched me in the face. It like just stopped. It was like I was on like this exciting ride of creating and all this other stuff. And, of course I was like, what happened? And they said,
Yeah.
just pump the brakes, just pause. And about 6 months ago, it was like the coolest thing, because I woke up in the morning and all I heard, it's time for Soul Genius. And I was like, I keep forgetting that sometimes we create things in preparation of the collective vibration being ready. Right. And it's so cool. I just love, love, love. The podcast is going to be starting its next season in September as Colleen, Spiritual Solutions for Life Situations. It's going to be a nice influx of, the Soul Genius work, along with, constantly healing tools, intuition, mentorship, like things I love, everything to do with the journey of finding yourself at home.
I'm so excited for that.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
thank
excited.
you for sharing.
Thank you.
We'll definitely link all of the ways people can connect with you down below, including your podcast. And I know you said Soul Genius will be available in the fall, so
Yep.
that'll be coming out in a few weeks, and we'll link your website so people can find that.
Sounds great.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you for all your wisdom. And thank you all to the listeners for listening in today. That wraps up our final episode of this Conscious Divorce series. It's been an honor to bring it to you and share my own personal stories through this experience and through this podcast. So thank you so much for being here to listen to it. And if you're dealing with this life situation, I really hope that you found value in the content that we discussed today and in the past 2 episodes. If you know anybody who could be helped by the content, I would be very grateful if you shared this podcast with a family member or friend. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences based off of the podcast. Please check our show notes for how to connect with us today. And if you'd enjoyed this episode, I'd also be very grateful to have you subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on any of the platforms. Looking forward to having you back in our next episode. Until next time, much love. Bye for now.